when Oklahoma used to get scared and have a scary result, it used to be from an offensive standpoint. They would get into some of these shootouts with maybe a lesser opponent once or twice a year, and you'd have a 45-42 kind of scare. Army comes to mind about 5 years ago. But with the change in style of play, now they're more slow and scary outcomes, as we saw against Houston. It's 16-12. Offensive line issues come to the forefront here, Parker. So we talked about it all off season, that the offensive line had question marks, but now question marks with some potential injuries that could impact the starting lineup this week.
Yeah, well, there's no potential about it. That offensive line is beleaguered and has been from really the start of fall camp for Oklahoma. Troy Everett, who started for half the season last year at left guard, the Appalachian State transfer, he underwent surgery in the spring. He has been unavailable ever since. He's gotten back to practicing in recent days, and he is expected back in the next couple of weeks. So that should be a nice shot in the arm for this Oklahoma offensive line. But Garen Hatchett, the Washington transfer whom they brought in to fortify the interior of that offensive line, tore a bicep in preseason camp, tried it for a week. It was very, very obvious that you're not playing offensive line at the power 4 level with a torn bicep. He toughed it out as much so as he possibly could, but ended up getting a season-ending surgery. So he is out of the picture for the foreseeable future. Right tackle Jake Taylor is dealing with a multiplicity of ailments. Tried to go last week against Houston, had to leave that game in the third quarter. And you add to that the injury status of SMU transfer center Branson Hickman, who drew the start in the opener, left the game on the second drive, and has not played since as he deals with what Brent Venables called an ankle sprain. The Sooners are very, very beleaguered up front. And until they get healthy, Mark, it's really a question of how well this offensive line could play, even if they were hitting all their marks, even if they were playing flawless football and establishing chemistry up front, because you're missing some of your enforcers. Branson Hickman was widely regarded as the top available interior offensive lineman in the entire spring portal cycle. So not having him available, having to figure things out, having to shuffle the deck a little bit has been tough on this line. Michael Tarquin started out the season at left tackle. He's had to move to right tackle. Jacob Sexton, or I should say Tarquin started out the season at right tackle, moved to the left side, moved back to the right side. Jacob Sexton started left tackle. He's had to slide inside to left guard. And it's really put a strain on this entire offensive line, just trying to compensate for all of these injuries that they're dealing with. It's two groups that Oklahoma right now just cannot get healthy, is the offensive line and the wide receiver room. And you felt that against Houston. You felt it.
Parker Thune, OU Insider, and of course, KREF Sports every Monday through Friday. That's at noon Central Time. And the person most impacted by that is, of course, Jackson Arnold. Mm-hmm. Is it a bit difficult to evaluate his performance? I know the numbers don't look pretty. The scoreboard doesn't look pretty from what happened on Saturday night against Houston.
No, and there's no real way to sugarcoat what happened Saturday night, Mark. I mean, it's not just the injuries that you can pin it on. Jackson Arnold needs to play better. And again, the circumstances, the environment, not necessarily conducive to the growth and maturation and flourishing of a young quarterback. But by the same token, there were a lot of throws on Saturday night that should have been made by the guy that's the starting quarterback at the University of Oklahoma that were not made. And so, yes, it is tough to evaluate his play, especially this early on. You got to take everything with a grain of salt as he gets his feet underneath him as the starter. I don't think anybody is rushing to throw Jackson Arnold on the pine, but by the same token, he does need to take a step up in terms of his level of play, his processing ability, and then just the confidence with which he pushes the ball downfield. Kind of seemed like he was trying to place some of those downfield throws when in reality what the Sooners want him to do, what they need him to do, is just air it out, trust that arm talent, trust that natural ability that was so evident as a senior in high school at Denton Geyer down in Texas when he won the National Gatorade Player of the Year honors. So the talent is there. I think right now with Arnold, it's just between the ears, and it certainly can't help his confidence that what he's dealing with is a patchwork offensive line and a patchwork receiver room that right now is missing 4 of their top 5 wideouts.
Yeah, I got to admit, Parker, I go to 3 screens every television window. You were obviously in the building, but Houston and Oklahoma was not one of my selections initially. But when there was 10 or 11 minutes left in the game, and I keep seeing 16-12 at the bottom, or I think it was 14-12 at that point at the bottom of the screen, I was like, okay, I have to to gut this one out. I got to see what's going on here. And of course, Oklahoma pulls off the safety that proved to be give them a little bit of a strategic advantage there in addition to the 2 points. Yeah, the receiver room that was lauded the entire offseason, you could take maybe one injury, but the multiple injuries to hit this group now, a strength has become a question mark.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, the reality of it, Mark, is there's no way around that. Like, that's not something you can really compensate for. You take 4 of the top 5 wide receivers on any roster in America, and that offense is gonna have struggles establishing a consistent passing attack. Nick Anderson has not played this year. Jaden Gibson is out for the season. Jalil Farouk left the Sooners opener on the first drive with a broken foot. He's going to miss 2 months. Andrell Anthony coming back from a torn ACL midseason last year. He's still not up to 100%. So, man, Deion Burks, the Purdue transfer, it felt like a luxury addition when Oklahoma brought him in this offseason. Didn't really feel like they needed Deion Burks. That was just kind of Emmett Jones flexing his muscles as an evaluator of talent and just flexing his muscles as far as his ability to go acquire that talent, go toe-to-toe with the top programs in America for one of the top portal denizens in America and Deion Burks. But if you don't have Deion Burks in that offense right now, Mark, I mean, who is playing wide receiver for Oklahoma? They're dealing with more injuries than I think anybody could have imagined was even possible throughout this season, let alone 3 weeks in, right? It's 3 weeks in and you already have all those guys on the shelf. And it's not the prettiest of pictures. They do have some exciting young talent, guys that have a lot of raw ability, but just aren't very seasoned. For instance, a guy that got 39 snaps in the game against Houston is true freshman Zion Reagans, a speedster, one of the fastest prospects in the country from the state of Georgia. But he's only been on campus for 3 months, and he's listed at 5'8", 150 pounds. That's a guy that you'd like to be using for 10, maybe 15 snaps a game, not 40. So, again, it was similar to that offensive line right now. The Sooners are having to press a lot of guys into action at the wide receiver position that are by no means in over their heads, but they're certainly being rushed along developmentally because they have to be.
And this daunting situation, unfortunately, comes at the same time in combination with a daunting schedule that we talked about the entire offseason. So that's coming soon, or maybe that's even coming on Saturday, because Tulane is no joke. And talk about wide receiver play. Old buddy Mario Williams shows up for Tulane, and he's off to a great start. It's good to see that Woody Washington is back as of last week and had a nice game, almost had an interception called back by penalty. But there's a matchup there. This Tulane team is obviously no joke.
Yeah, Oklahoma can't get caught looking past them. They got to take this team seriously. Tulane went down to the wire with Kansas State just a week ago. And the thing about that Tulane team, Mark, is that I think most would concur their weakness is in the secondary. If you can effectively push the ball downfield, you'll have success. But can the Sooners effectively push the ball downfield in the passing game? That is a significant and lingering question after the collective offensive performance and the performance of Jackson Arnold against Houston. So, no, they cannot look past Tulane. But then on the other side of that matchup with the Green Wave, you got a Tennessee team coming to town the next week that has looked as good as anybody in America through 2 weeks, Mark. So This is not the juncture at which you want to have some of your key contributors sidelined. It is not an ideal situation in the slightest.
Yeah, Tulane, of course, college football fans, even outside of Tulane and Oklahoma camps, will recall 3 seasons ago the scare that the
Yeah.
Green Wave, on their way to a 2-10 season, provided in Norman. 40-35, Michael Pratt stopped 4th and inches at midfield. It's a very different Tulane program now. Willie Fritz, of course, off to Houston, really built it up, and it appears as though John Summerall is picking it right back to where it was because of the good performance against a good Kansas State team that's typically considered a top 15 to 20 team in all of college football. I should have asked this sooner, but I was just interested in what the tenor of the stadium was like in the second half, because it was such a drag of a game.
Yeah.
But on top of the scary situation, the score.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to describe it, Mark. The best way that I can kind of encapsulate all that occurred Saturday night and the collective reaction to it from the fans is, walking out of that stadium. I've covered a lot of OU games over the years. I don't know that with regard to the environment and the general vibe from the fans in attendance, I don't know that there has ever been a win that felt like less of a win to those folks than that 16-12 squeaker over Houston. It was it was more relief than anything. The fact that, well, a combination of relief and also alarm, because yes, you escaped Houston, but I think it was then and there that everyone realized, oh man, this offense does have some challenges that they're going to have to face, and they're going to have to get squared away here in the next couple of weeks, because no longer are you playing in the Big 12, Mark, where for at least 9 or 10 games out of the season, you just have substantially more talent than the opposition. You're playing SEC ball now. Everybody is as talented as you. And so, yes, again, not to look past Tulane, but starting with Tennessee on September 21st, man, you better have all your ducks in a row, because you can't rely on sheer firepower to elevate you to 10, 11 victories, as has been the standard and the expectation at Oklahoma for so long.
And again, to put all this together in terms of a complete situation, it's not just saying, let's go back to the drawing board. It's let's go back to the drawing board, but we don't have our Jimmies and Joes to do so. We're going to have to figure out with the second and third guys. Wow. I don't know that there's a team in the country that's in this situation.
No, I
From
don't
a
I don't think there
personnel
is,
standpoint.
Mark,
I
and
don't
I
think
don't
so.
claim to have a pulse on all 133 FBS teams, but I find it hard to believe that there is a program that is A, dealing with this many injuries at the same time, and B, this many injuries concentrated within two very significant, very important position groups.
We see a similar, well, I don't want to compare the situations. We see a situation at Florida State where they're losing football games. Oklahoma's not losing football games as of yet, and we see it affecting recruiting at Florida State. Any reverb there in regards to a possibility of it hurting recruiting, and what are some of the recruiting landmarks that are coming up?
No, I really don't think it'll have too much of an effect. Look, Oklahoma still technically has a verbal pledge from 4-star wide receiver Cortez Mills from Homestead, Florida. Not really expecting that one to stick. He took a visit to Nebraska over the weekend. Oklahoma's got 4 other receivers besides Mills committed in the class, so if they lose him, it's not the end of the world. I'm not even sure they would go pursue another wideout. They'd just stick with the 4 that they have solidly committed. So that's the one guy right now in the class that I think you can pretty well expect not to remain in the class. But beyond that, when there's a very obvious explanation for your shortcomings as a football team, I think it makes it easier to explain to recruits, right? If you're Mike Norvell in Florida State right now, it's not all that easy to explain why you lost to Georgia Tech to open the season and then got taken to the woodshed on your home field by Boston College. That's going to be a tough thing for 16, 17-year-old kids to reckon with. But if you're in Brent Venables' shoes, it's not that hard. And he did so in his press conference earlier this week. He basically said in so many words, look, how solid can you expect this football team to be when we have so many of our top guys that are sidelined? And so I think just because of the circumstances, it's not going to be too difficult to make sure that your recruits, that your 2025 class as a whole, still pretty content, confident, still has that belief in what Venables and his staff are building at Oklahoma, circumstances right this second aside.
Follow the saga further with Parker every day on OU Insider, and of course Monday through Friday on KREF Sports. Parker shows again at noon Central Time. Parker, anything else to add to that in regards to your coverage leading up to the Tulane game and then on into the SEC opener?
No, sir. I mean, if you're watching on YouTube, you're already on YouTube. Finish watching Mark's show, and then you might check out the OUinsider.com YouTube channel, where we've got loads of additional content. Most of the good stuff is on OUinsider.com itself, but you can subscribe to the YouTube channel for free. Pretty easy, surface level way to make sure that you're staying up to speed with everything that's going on within the Oklahoma football program and out on the recruiting trail as well.
Parker, thanks so much for stopping by. Enjoy the game this weekend.
Yep, appreciate it, Mark.